Hey everyone, this is Carter through Voice Memos. Here just to give a little intro before today's episode. Today's episode is recorded after a pretty sleepless night. I'm pretty sleep deprived. So I apologize for not being my most articulate today. I make a couple mistakes. I said that Drew Barrymore was Canadian. She is not Canadian. Apologies to her. Drew Barrymore, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the show. In addition, I'm just kind of an awkward Santa Claus metaphor made about halfway through. If anyone catches that in the comments, make sure to point out how awkward you thought that was. And if you have a better one, please drop it in the comments. In addition, in kind of pop culture news, we don't really touch on this, but I wanted to talk about this. That's all I want to talk about. The Minecraft movie came out recently. I went to see it. It was a really fun experience. Please go. Please shout. Please have fun. Take part in the cultural moment that the Minecraft movie is. As a generation, we've been waiting for this for a while. Now, I remember in the movie, Minecraft YouTuber Technoblade, that died of cancer in 2022, I believe, is honored by there's a pig with a crown that gets some attention by Jack Black. And I remember after the movie, there was a kid that couldn't have been older than 8, explaining to his dad why that was in the movie. And it was because somebody had died of cancer. And I was thinking, wow, that's pretty heavy. And it's a beautiful thing that something as silly fun as Minecraft, gets people thinking about serious issues like that. And how important it is to honor people that have gone. But yeah, so enjoy today's episode. Have an open heart, have an open mind, but especially open ears. Please let me know what you think. I set up a Gmail account if you guys have any feedback on the podcast, anything you want to send in. There is a call to action in this episode, so you can jump in and send what a request during it to electriccircuspod, P-O-D, at gmail.com. That's electriccircuspod at gmail.com. I'm kind of proud that I was able to spell that out right. It's a lot of C's and a lot of weird locations. All right, enjoy the show. Thanks so much. Let's do it. And we're going. Dr. Ed Mihalkanin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Carter.
First and second episode now. So we were just talking about how little me and my girlfriend had slept last night, and Ed had this to say.
Well, there's a very old saying that 1 hour of sleep before midnight is worth 3 hours of sleep after midnight. So just take that. Now, I'll be the first to admit, as an undergraduate, if I went to bed before 1 o'clock in the morning, it was because I was sick. So when I was a sophomore, junior, senior, never went to bed before 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, there's a second interesting thing, though, and this seems to be common throughout the United States and Canada, Europe. People would go to bed pretty much at dusk. But then after sleeping 5-6 hours, they'd wake up. And roughly between the times of midnight and 3 in the morning, people would actually engage in social events. So remember, it's not the heat of the day, especially if this is summer or even spring, not the heat of the day. They'd get their rest, but then they'd go out and they go to each other's homes. Maybe this is when they would have a birthday celebration or anniversary or whatever, or just normal getting together with people in your neighborhood. And it's remarkable to me that was so common, right? That people just knew, oh, no. At the end of the day, you're just tired, you're just beat, you had a little bit to eat, now you're gonna go to sleep. But then, it's midnight, you get up, and you interact with your neighbors, and then you go back to bed for a couple hours and then wake up at dawn.
Is there anything to be said for that, like scientifically? Because I know, didn't Newton, his thing was that he slept maybe that was Da Vinci, sleeping in 3-hour chunks, being awake for 6 hours, another 3 hours. They swore by that, right?
Yeah, but what's interesting, though, really scientific study of sleep really is a post-World War II phenomenon. There was a lot of conjecture. There was a lot of, Thomas Edison being insane and not sleeping for a week. And then collapsing and sleeping for 15 minutes and then getting up and saying, oh, I feel fine. No, you're not fine, Tommy. You're a nut. But what they did was there was a whole series of experiments. One man actually moved into a cave that was so far away from its opening, it had no outside light. So, and he didn't have a clock. So he just went in, and then, of course, he had to live there a couple months. And literally his day, when I say day, I mean a 24-hour period, was like 23 hours and 45 minutes. It was very close to what we consider to be a 24-hour day. It does seem like there's two very low energy times for human beings, and it's interesting. 4 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's when our energy seems to ebb. Now, some people will literally have think of the siesta in Spanish language cultures. After a bigger meal in the middle of the day, then you sleep, 2 to 5 or whatever, or 3 to 5, and then you go back out again. Others think of Britain, and what's a very prototypical thing, event, I don't know if I should call it an event, but a practice that many British people or people who were colonies of Britain will do in the afternoon. Tea time. Perfect, right? Tea, caffeine, and pastries or whatever. It's food, it's energy, it's sugar. So it's interesting that different cultures seem to, without realizing, know that there's a kind of like a downtime at about 4 in the afternoon. And instead of, some will say, well, I'm going to sleep. The British say, no, this is a big excuse to have a gigantic mini meal, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's just interesting to me culturally how you see these responses to what seems to be a biological reality for people.
Well, there's also the weird thing of sleep is if I get if I've been getting really good sleep, if I get like 5 or 6 hours of sleep, I'm fine the next day. It's the day after that. Even if I get 8 hours that next night, it's that day after that I really start feeling the lag of that. And the opposite, if I sleep too much, like if I sleep 10 hours, I'm just as groggy than if I slept like 4 for that next day. I remember too, I had a buddy of mine had ex-girlfriend now, but we used to go over to her house, and she had a room that, like you're talking about the cave, just completely blacked out. Would go in there, take some melatonin beforehand, and just die. 13 hours of sleep. And that would be, I'm good for like 3 days, you know what I'm talking about?
That's a little scary though.
It really was.
Could you maybe you should have had some, could someone wake me up if they don't see me for a while? You just don't want to turn into a hibernating bear.
I know.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, the caffeine thing, that's a weird thing. That I'm sure you saw there's a story of a guy, I think it was in Texas, a college student, went to Panera Bread, and they had something called like an electric charged lemonade, and it had a lot of caffeine in it. But I guess there wasn't a sign or something. So he was there studying for hours, and he just kept refilling it, kept drinking it. I think he had like 4 large cups of it, died of a heart attack.
Yeah, people have to realize that, and I'm not anti-caffeine, but people have to realize that caffeine could be viewed as a drug, right?
Sure,
Certainly a stimulant. And again, you made a good point about, well, it was concentrated, right? It was like excess caffeine, and the young man kept on drinking it, but I have a feeling he didn't eat anything. And my father, for example, was a letter carrier for the U.S. Post Office forever. Every single morning, 2 cups of coffee with breakfast, cup of coffee at 10, roughly 10 in the morning, then at least 1 cup, maybe 2 at lunch. Then he'd have his afternoon cup of coffee at 3. Are you nuts? Mm-hmm. Then he'd come home, take a nap on the recliner. It's like, how? You've just had, 2, 3, 5, 6 cups of coffee. Didn't faze him. Sleeps for an hour or 2 in the recliner, has dinner and has a cup of coffee. Stays up and listens to the first half hour of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. But think about it. It was so much a part of his routine. Now, me, if I have a Coke at 7 o'clock at night at dinner or something, I'm not sleeping. Mm-hmm. I fall asleep at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning because I'm just not used to caffeine.
I went out to dinner with her parents this past weekend. And to me, like, I rarely have soda. So to me, I don't drink. So that's my, like, I'll slam 5 glasses of Coke, and that's my like binge drinking. You know what I mean? Yeah, the coffee before bed thing, that's really weird. I remember watching a show with Steve Harvey and Jerry Seinfeld, and they were talking, this was a couple years ago, and I just started drinking coffee, and they were talking about how they have to have a cup of coffee before bed. I was thinking, that's really bizarre. Like, I don't get that. But to me, I've gotten to that point, kind of my addiction to it, where if I have like 2 cups in a row, that exhausts me rather than getting me higher.
Sure.
It's a weird thing, but
Well, what we have to realize is, there's 330 million people in the United States. There's we have over 8 billion people on the planet. Now, we do know that there's within certain groups, like many Chinese people, and not just Chinese people, have difficulty with processing milk, right? Where others, like, think of Europeans, think of people in the United States. Yeah, what do you mean? How can we not process milk? We would call that now people who can't lactose intolerant, right, to make it a fancy word. But I think what you have to remember is we're all individual biological organisms, what's the more sci-fi term? We're carbon-based life forms, right? And my DNA, my environment, my everything is different from yours. We're both here in Texas, both here in San Marcos. We both might have somewhat similar DNAs in terms of where our ancestors came from, but we're ourselves, right? And so we have to, and this is where people have to own their own medical care, meaning I am upset with myself that I didn't talk to my parents, talk to my doctor and say, could we have a copy of my childhood medical records? Okay, because now I'm in a catch-22. I don't know if you've heard this. The U.S. medical community has finally woken up to the reality that doctors since the 1950s have been over-prescribing antibiotics. Okay, I applaud that. I'm glad that they recognize they've been over-prescribing and maybe they need to cut back a little bit. But now I'm in a bind. My family doctor was named Dr. Partridge, not making it up. And when you're a kid, I don't know, maybe things are more informal for people your age. When you're a kid, Dr. Partridge's first name is Doctor. I have no idea what the first name of his was, still to this day. Okay, he told my parents when they first came in, and this would have been 1961, saying, look, I know people consider me a dinosaur. I know people are critical for me because I will not prescribe antibiotics, first rattle out of the box. But now remember, this is this old coot doctor in Elgin, Illinois, right? 1950s, 1960s into the 70s. But he thought that doctors are over-prescribing antibiotics. I did have my tonsils taken out, so I don't know if they gave me antibiotics then. But I did not have antibiotics, except maybe for that, until I was 28 with a sinus infection. And I remember distinctly saying to a friend of mine, yeah, I've got this, I described the symptoms of a sinus infection. And he laughed. He says, how do you not know what that is? And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, you have a sinus infection. I said, well, then that means I've had a sinus infection at least twice before, and it went away by themselves. And he said, what are you talking about? Sinus infections don't go away by themselves. I said, mine did. I had one I remember distinctly having these symptoms when I was an undergraduate, and it went away by itself, and I had it one other time. He says, no, that's impossible. I said, no, I'm telling you, I'm not making this up. And when I told the doctor, and then he had a doctor that I went to, and he said, oh, yeah, so he gave me antibiotics. And I said, oh, first time I've had antibiotics. The doctor didn't believe me. This would have been in the late 1980s. I would have been in my 30s. No, I would have been 28. So yeah, early to mid 80s. First time I had antibiotics. Now, I'm not counting a tetanus shot as antibiotics. I mean, that's very specific. So you don't die of lockjaw. You step on a rusty nail. That's a very specific drug. But I didn't have penicillin I've only had penicillin twice, and the first time I had it, I was in my 40s. So, but now I'm in a bind. The reason I was giving you the epic story of my medical history, sorry guys who are listening, there's a point to this. I had bronchitis last year. They said, yeah, you have bronchitis. I said, okay, so antibiotics? Oh no, we don't do that anymore because of COVID. I said, hello? I said, excuse me? So they knew I had bronchitis. No, you'll just tough it out. So I didn't get antibiotics as a kid. because Dr. Partridge correctly is saying overprescribing. So now I'm in my 60s, and they're saying, no, you don't get my antibiotics. I say, hey, wait, time out. Okay, I'm not, John Doe. I'm not John Q. customer medical patient, who is in the norm. I'm an outlier, all right? Because in the 1960s into the 70s, no antibiotics, because my doctor said it was overprescribed. So now I feel like I'm getting the short end of the stick on 2 different parts of my life, my childhood, adolescence. Now I'm in my 60s. So what I would say to all of you, okay, you're young, you bounce off of concrete, but wherever you like your first job, your first city, make sure somehow you have a copy of your childhood medical records. Because I had chickenpox, and I was maybe, 6. I didn't remember it. But do you know what disease you can get if you had chickenpox as a kid when you're older?
What?
Shingles. Now, I didn't know that there was a shingles vaccine. Didn't know, right? Because for decades there wasn't. I got shingles in 2020, in like February of 2020, got shingles. And you can bet that once I got over it and, I got the shingles vaccine, but I would have really, really much preferred not to have shingles because they're extraordinarily painful. Very, very painful.
Listeners at home, we have a lot of young listeners. I'm college age, a lot of college age friends listening to this. If you get your childhood medical records, get them now. Email a photo of you holding them to the show, electriccircuspod@gmail.com. We'd love to see you. We'd love to celebrate you. Send them into the show. But with the overprescribing thing, I think that extends to when I was in middle school, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And I remember going to the doctor's office, and I was in there because I had heard about what Adderall was. So I was in there with the goal of I'm going to come out of here with Adderall, with the prescription. I'm 13, 12, whatever, thinking this. So I go in, and I had to take a survey. And I remember it being a checklist of yes or no. And it was, do you have trouble focusing sometimes? Yeah. Would you rather be doing other things in class? Yeah. Do you sometimes just want to leave the room and walk around the hallways? Sure. So I'm checking yes on all these. Then the doctor looks at that, looks at my mom and goes, do you agree with these answers? And she goes, yeah, sometimes he does struggle focusing. I could see that. And he goes, okay, here's his prescription for Adderall. Now, I just think I'm no doctor. But for something like that to be prescribed, a drug like that was a hard drug. I remember taking that, and I was same height I am now. I didn't really grow much beyond that. I'm about 150 pounds now. I was probably 105, 110, 115 pounds throughout that era. There's so many language games that are played with medicine that I don't understand. I'm not going to pretend to understand, pretend to be a doctor. Like example, birth control. Birth control is a great thing for society. But it's funny that it's called birth control and not short-term chemical castration. So with Adderall, it's this idea, it's just focusing. It's a focusing thing. That's what a lot of people call it. A lot of people in college take all the time. I got to study for my final. I got a friend who loaned me some Adderall. But no, it's just that what it does too, the way it just shocks like your serotonin receptor. I don't know the science, but it's crazy. And in some ways, I feel like a lot of the issues my generation is seeing with mental health is the simultaneous thing. I remember I was talking to a friend, and he was like, yeah, man, I think I have depression. I think I have anxiety. I think I have ADHD. And 4 months ago, he was fine, right? But now we're talking and saying all this. And the difference just was his life changed a lot. He went to college. We all went to college, right? And I told him, I was like, do you have all these different mental disorders, or do you just have mental disorder?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. I'm shocked that just from a yes, look at it. I could hand that questionnaire, the way you described it, Carter, to people my age, maybe as young as their 30s to 60s. And I bet you, if you say, do you ever have trouble concentrating? Well, of course I do. Sometimes. Do you sometimes wish you could walk out of a room? Do you know how many meetings I've been in in my life? Yeah, that's the go-to. Leave the room so you don't say anything you'll regret. This is where it's extraordinarily important about the words used. It never should be do you ever, but more is it more constant? Is like, what's a default, right? What's the, what do you experience regularly versus what do you occasionally, right? So if that questionnaire said, do you most of the time, do you have trouble? And then you probably would have said no to that. You wouldn't have said yes. If you said most times do you have trouble concentrating, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm guessing you would have said no, not most times. And remember also what you have to remember is our medical system is encased in a broader consumer culture, right? Consumer culture, right? Look at advertisements. If you drink this beer, you will have a beautiful boyfriend, girlfriend. You will have a house on the beach and an apartment in Manhattan, and your life will be perfect because you're buying this product. Europeans laugh all the time. They say, wow, your television commercials, people in the United States are epic. We just say, you might enjoy eating this, if you like this kind of stuff. It's a completely different kind of advertising universe. And so for me, I had a good friend. His solution was, I got a pill. No. Why didn't you get up off of your enormous behind and walk around the block? Why don't you walk a mile a day? You've got a built-in swimming pool. I never seen you in it, right? And yeah, he was heavy, and yes, he had some problems with his legs, but go into a pool, you've got buoyancy. The water will hold up your body, so maybe you will have less leg problems if you walk in your pool for a half hour, right? It's not swimming, but if you walk in your pool for a half hour a day, then then you can walk around, right? So to me, the solution for our situations is product. Here's a pill. Instead of change your diet, get some exercise. You've come into my office. I'll have some music that is real mellow, that's designed to be mellow. Sometimes I'll be listening to Gregorian chants. Other times I want to listen to Led Zeppelin. But if I read myself correctly and say, okay, for some reason I feel agitated today. I have no idea why. Everything's going good. Nothing's a problem. But I just feel kind of like not quite centered. Put on the mellow music, And it's incredible, Carter. But the old adage, take 3 deep breaths. Something as simple as that. It is very difficult to be angry or to be anxious after you've taken 3 deep breaths. Now think about how simple that is. Not a pill. You didn't have to buy anything. Didn't have to see a doctor. Just, breathe in, hold a beat, and then breathe out. And you do that twice more, and you already feel differently. You actually, your mental state, your psychological state is different. So,
there's a T.S. Eliot play called The Cocktail Party. I believe the story is from that play. I read it in high school. So I'm a little foggy on it. But this lady is talking to a therapist, and she's laying on the couch, and she's just saying, my life is terrible, my marriage isn't going well, I feel really insecure about things, I feel completely out of control in my life, but I hope it's my fault. And the therapist is a little taken aback, and he goes, what? He goes, it sounds like you got a pretty rough hand dealt to you. What do you mean you hope it's your fault? And she goes, no, because if it's my fault, I can do something about it. And I think with all these issues of health, it's been really upsetting to see my generation take it of there's something fundamentally wrong with me, and only the pill can help. Not I have a plan where I'm going to take it for a few months and start also introducing these lifestyle changes. I'm just going to take it, and hopefully I'll just forget about the problem and it'll go away.
Well, but in fairness to folks your age, Carter, look, you're fish swimming in a certain kind of water. Mm-hmm. You're in, like I said, you're in a very deeply rooted consumer culture, right? Even PBS, right? Where, they'll say, you'll know who's, a lot of times it's a corporate sponsor, right? And they'll say, we're X, we're Y. And so even in PBS, which is by definition non-commercial television, you have a sense if it's not a foundation, if it is a company, you'll know who it is. So I think but see, this was another interesting thing. I would love you to talk about it, and that is, yeah, there is this sense of maybe people your age. Yeah, let's buy something, let's ingest something, and that will make things better. At the same time that's going on, I'm getting a sense that there is a really large segment of you, of your age, that are very suspicious of vaccines, and other what could be called mainstream medical. And so to me, this is and again, I haven't done any systematic study of consumer surveys by age or anything, but it seems like, and again, people your age, you're hearing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. say, oh, there's never a perfect vaccine. And so people died of measles out in the Pacific because of believing him. So I understand, there is a lot of doubt out there about vaccines and other things. So I can understand why younger people who are like just, learning about the world, learning about, hey, medicine, this, that, and the other, might say, well, look at all these people. He's the Secretary of Health and Human Services saying this, or he has said it in the past. So how do you what's going on here with, yeah, I can take Adderall for my ADHD, which I may or may not have, that openness to, well, I'm not so sure I'm going to get the vaccine for COVID or for the flu or for anything else.
I think it's a thing of like, if your parents tell you Santa Claus is real and you're dealing with, that's the headspace you're going with, and then you figure out your parents weren't honest with you, you're really upset about that. But then your parents also tell you need to clean up your room. We have company coming over, and they won't be happy if they see the room's a mess. And you're thinking, well, you lied to me about the Santa Claus thing, so why should I trust you here? That's very elementary kind of metaphor. But I think how it links is, take the situation with Adderall, where, again, it was sold to me, to my face, is this will solve your problem. Not linking to the whole I hope it's my fault thing. Nowadays, I've realized that, sure, maybe I have something you can call ADHD, but I know that a lot of those things are skills. Organization, studying, that's a skill. That's not a thing that some people might be more prone to being good at that, but that's a thing that everybody has to learn at some point. It's just because you don't automatically know how to effectively study, I don't think that means you should have a hardcore stimulant being thrown in your 12-year-old brain.
Right, right.
But yeah, with the vaccines thing, is I think it's a dangerous thing of, I don't know exactly where the responsibility lies. Of, you could say that that's just my generation feeling like they touched the stove and got burned on antidepressants. So they're like, why would I trust you with vaccines, with things that you're going to put into me as a child? Which I think, again, it's a dangerous slope where that's not coherent thinking. That's not medical thinking. It's to be like, because I'm suspicious of medicine, I'm therefore suspicious of vaccines. But just people have lost trust in institutions and the things that they go to instead. I mean, I don't blame the people that when they were told to take the COVID vaccine, they went, well, I'm young, I'm fit, I eat what's good for my immune system, I get exercise, I get sunlight every day. Why ought I take a vaccine? Why am I considered like a parasite on the culture or something if I don't take one? Sure. I can understand that mindset.
Sure.
Sure. And I think if that were to be called some kind of right-wing extremism, now we're in a broader context about like what I think cost Democrats this past election. I remember afterwards, I believe I had read from a left-wing columnist that said the issue with what happened this past election is we told these groups of people, you're right-wing maniacs for believing X. And maybe X wasn't actually a right-wing maniac belief. But because you accused those people so much, they finally started listening to you. And they said, if you're gonna crucify me by telling me I belong to this category, screw you. I'm just gonna go join that category.
Well, sure. So you have to meet people where they are, frankly, and so I think that Harris did a better job than what people give her credit for.
She did,
because there's not the same democratic ecosystem in modern communication like there is in the Republican/conservative reactionary ecosystem, right? So, Newsmax, Fox News, different podcasters, right? But what I would say is, and I do think at least initially Harris was doing this, is, hey, yeah, inflation was high last year, but think of what we did so that inflation this year is 3%, not 9%. And basically had to, and they felt uncomfortable doing it for some reason. Do you know why the inflation rate was as high as it was in 2022? The oil companies blatantly, publicly said in April, May of 2021, we, the oil companies, are not increasing production and we're not increasing refining. Why? Because the oil companies said, hey, we lost a lot of money. They didn't really lose it. They just didn't have the earnings they were expecting. Their profit margins weren't what they expected in 2020. So to make up for the loss in 2020 and the first roughly half of 2021, they were saying, no, we're not going to increase production and refining. Obviously, people now are going back to work literally in their offices, in their workplace. So instead of doing it 0 times a week or 2 times a week, they're doing it 5 times a week. That alone is going to increase demand, right? Second thing, bottlenecks in the production process. There was a type of, I'll call it a policy, of businesses called just in time. You can look this up, just capital J, don't know if the I was capitalized T, just in time. And what the businesses patted themselves on the back by 2019 saying, you know, why are we spending all this money on warehousing products? The problems of the international supply chain have been solved. Anytime in the future, you hear a bunch of people saying something about the economy has been solved, you know we're going to hit a brick wall, okay? Because I don't know where it is, if it's karma, but I remember seeing a person giving the commencement address at Texas State University when we were still Southwest Texas State in the late 1990s. And he said, oh, we've solved the problems of the economy. I said, that's what they said in 1929. And then we had the recession in 1930 that turned into the international tragedy of the Great Depression. So, bottlenecks, just in time. They had maybe 3 days of parts. Now the whole economy is shut down, and guess what happens? Now production people are saying, hey, I want to buy stuff. They didn't have 6 months of supply of parts that they could put into the production. No, they were now hammering at their suppliers. And the suppliers, you know this supply and demand curve, right? Increased demand, supply stays the same. What happens to the price? It goes up. So if they had stockpiled, if they had warehoused these parts, but that was multiple business decisions. You know what the third reason for the inflation was? Businesses knew that consumers were expecting higher prices. They padded their prices. They added 1 to 2% to the price. So out of the 9% inflation we had, if many businesses were not price gouging, inflation, sure, 9% is high. It would have only been 7%. Okay, and then the fourth reason, which as an elected official nobody can say, but it was the U.S. people demanded goods right when they then started to go out, right? And then we were going, quote unquote, back to normal. There seemed to be no self restraint on turning into massive consumers again, right? And like, look, I purposely didn't buy anything unless I had to. And I'm not talking about normal food and gasoline and things, but if I didn't have to, I didn't buy anything in the second half of 2021 and all of 2022. I just bought a new stove for my kitchen in my home in 2023. And because I knew, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to add to the demand. So now, you certainly could have, as an elected official or someone who wants to be, bring out, it was corporate America, which is disproportionately responsible for the 9% inflation, but they didn't do that. So of course it's government's fault, right? And what they could have said is, hey, inflation sucks. It sucks. It's bad. Yeah, of course it is. But look what we've done to try to mitigate it so that we won't have that kind of inflation in the future from something like this. Remember the what was it called? The Reduce Inflation Act, Build Back Better, all these infrastructure, all of the things that Biden was able to convince Congress to pass will make our economy stronger in the future. And they didn't make that argument. They think, this is the ironic thing, the Democrats, as a general rule, think the average U.S. voter is more politically engaged than they are. Yeah. Okay? Think about that for a second. So what did Trump do when the checks went out? He had his name put on it. Biden didn't. Mm-hmm. Now, what if Biden had his, you know what I mean? I mean, now, and this is the thing, people don't realize it's congressional laws. Congress passes laws, and Biden respects Congress. He was a member of the Senate for decades. But the Democrats have to, if they're going to be successful, they need to do a better job with public relations, with marketing.
And that's the art of war of it, as you're right, of when it comes to, if controlling the narrative is one of those essential functions of being a government that's in touch with the people, is by going, here's the story, and here's why what we're doing links up with this overarching narrative. And Trump, regardless of what you think of that narrative, he is an expert at that. That's what he's best at, is going, here's how this is, here's how the Democrats are doing this, and we're doing this in response, or we're doing this because the Democrats don't want us to. It's brilliant. It's brilliant public relations.
And the thing is, what the Democrats have to realize, they have to repeat more.
Yes, and I think it was I remember this, some political commentator was saying that, I lost it. But when it comes to Biden too, just throughout the presidency, this could be attributed to a lot of things. This could be attributed to kind of like what you're saying about just the lack of messaging. This could be attributed to the cognitive issues he was facing. But he just, there wasn't really a defense of what's happening. There wasn't really an explanation that it felt like the public could be, oh, this is something to be excited about. And there were things to be excited about, but the public wasn't feeling like it. Yeah. And I think it was Gavin Newsom. I think it was Gavin Newsom and this new wave he's doing. He did an interview with Tim Walz recently, where Tim Walz was saying like, I could kick any Republican's ass, like any Trump supporter's ass, like talking like that. And Newsom was like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, why would you want to?
Well, yeah, why would you want to? And you're saying that as if that instills some confidence or gets us closer to some kind of victory. It's like, what I remember it now. What this commentator had said is a weird thing about the Democrat Party is they didn't even seem curious for the longest time, for the first 6 years or something of the Trump era, as to why people even like Trump. As to why people look at Trump and go, that's a leader I'm excited about. And to me, a lot of it is that because of the deep specialization we live in, because of the carefulness and the precision we try to use in our language, you could attribute that to social justice, you could attribute that to just an evolving society, whatever you want to call it. People enjoyed that Trump goes on stage and makes definitive, simple claims. We're going to fix the economy. This is the golden age of America. That's something you can just look, you can clip that. That's a 10-second clip, and that's something you can get excited about. Whereas with a lot of the other, with commentators that are being more precise, they will make a lot more statements of like, well, it appears based on the following evidence, and some claims have been made that, yeah.
Look at it this way. I mean, I know you're in college now, but I think you'll remember this 2016 presidential campaign.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the initial? Now, the overarching theme of the Trump campaign in 2016 was "Make America Great Again," which I don't know why he was able to actually copyright that, because that's from a speech, more than one speech from Ronald Reagan when he ran for president in 1980. Let's make America great again. Okay. No one in the Reagan family ever copywritten it, so he was able to. Okay. So "Make America Great Again" was the overarching theme. But many themes in that campaign was build a wall. Unfortunately, horribly, lock her up.
Drain the swamp.
Drain the swamp. And Trump himself said, I was very surprised at how much that resonated. He didn't use the word resonate. I'm using the word resonate. Resonated with the American public. Think about that for a second. he was surprised how much people gravitated to that. Well, look at his presidency. Drain the swamp. He's brought the swamp into the grounds of the White House. Basically, he turned the White House into a car dealership. With that, I don't know if you
literally, Tesla
into a
front,
car dealer. I think that's what it was. There's Elon Musk with a Tesla car, and Trump saying, "Oh, look at that," and "Oh, look at that," and then what does he gets into the car, President of the United States, on the grounds of the White House, and what does he say? Oh, it's all computers. Remember, it's all computers in there.
A great moment too we can't forget is whenever he got out of the car, he got out pretty briskly, and he said, "You think Biden could do that?"
See, that's the thing. Look, I met actually Biden decades ago when I was a graduate student at American University in Washington, D.C. He was a senator. This would have been early 1980s.
Yeah.
Okay, now, sake of argument, that's 1984. So 84, is that 40 years ago? So from the 24 election, so it's 40, okay. Biden is not a shouter. He's not loud, okay? He's, in a way, the anti-Trump just in terms of how he presents himself, okay? Yeah. So when he talked to the group of us at American University about U.S. foreign policy, he wasn't shouting. He wasn't, that's just not him. So he was always a softer spoken individual, okay? So part of it for Biden was, since nobody outside of Delaware, maybe, even when he was vice president for 8 years under Obama, right? How much did people actually hear Biden speak? Right? We know the cadence of Obama speaking. We know George W. Bush, right? We know Hillary Clinton. But Biden, there wasn't a strong, right? This is how Biden speaks, right? So when they saw him as the president, when he's in his 70s, that was their snapshot. So they said, oh, he's old and he's speaking softly. Like, he's speaking softly because he is old, right? No, that's how Biden spoke in the 1980s. That's how Biden spoke in the 1970s when he first got elected to the U.S. Senate. But since most American people didn't have that breath to say, oh, no, that's just, look how many times someone says, oh, that's just Trump being Trump. Well, how come it's not Biden being Biden, right? Well, Biden was that soft-spoken in the 1970s.
I agree with you. But to be fair, I think one thing that really hurt Kamala Harris's campaign is, speaking of the impression we get of somebody when they're in office, whenever she was a vice president, the only time I had seen her is when she was doing apologetic interviews, or not, but more defensive interviews about Biden, saying, no, the president of the United States, he's sharp as a tack. He knows exactly, But I just think if you watch the guy talk,
sure,
and it's just nothing against him. I think he had a way better presidency than any media outlet was giving him credit for. But I don't think it's true that if you sat down with Joe, or to be more fair, watch him do a speech in front of a room, and you walk out and you go, man, that's a guy who has it together. Right. I don't care soft-spoken or not. It's just, and then you get great lines. Oh, he has a lifelong stutter. It's like, no, he didn't stutter. He didn't stutter.
Let's put it this way. There's multiple truths, little t. Mm-hmm. Yes, there was cognitive decline in Biden. Mm-hmm. There was, and his top aides and his wife did a disservice to him and the country in not sitting down with him and saying, Joe, I love you, but it's not possible. You got screwed by history. You should have got the Democratic nomination in 2016.
Yes.
If you had, you would be a two-term president. You'd be beloved. But sometimes the fates can be harsh. We love you, but you can't do this. And if people very, very close to him in early 2023 had said that, I think he would have gotten the message. I think he would have said, I'm not running again. That would have opened up the field. Now, let's pretend the field is wide open. The Democrats do a really great job at blaming themselves for everything. Yeah. Okay? Republicans, as a general rule, seem to be psychoanalyzed by God. Oh, no, it's nobody's fault. I'm perfect, right? Trump was asked point blank, what mistakes have you ever made in your life? Oh, I can't think of any. I just can't. Think about it. How old is he? He's in his 70s. Of course he made mistakes. Excuse me? You're on your third marriage. Isn't that by definition? Means if you're on your third marriage, well, your first two marriages were a mistake because you got a divorce.
Yeah.
A divorce is not success by definition. okay? So why didn't he? Do you know how human he could have looked if he just, well, I'm on my third. Like, look at how you laughed, right? Well, yeah, this is my third marriage. I guess my first two marriages were a mistake, and people could relate to that. But it was a little unnerving that he couldn't bring himself to say, yeah, I made this mistake. Yes, I have made mistakes, and here's a couple.
Another unnerving is kind of Trumpism, real quick. And I think this just says so much to, I don't know, that he's in character or what. I've only heard him, like, belly laugh, like, legitimately be caught off guard and laugh, like, twice.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. He'll just, even when he's trying to be funny, he'll just completely be straight-faced about it.
Yes. The second truth I wanted to mention to you is people were putting Harris in an impossible position. Mm-hmm. She's the vice president. Okay. Every single vice president, okay, who's above the vice president?
The president.
Okay. Now, think constitutionally, think governmentally, think internationally. Harris. What about President Biden? Oh, yeah, he's drooling on himself. He wears Depends. Oh, no, that's Trump. Whatever. Yeah, he's completely, I mean, people would have been outraged because it would look like she was angling for his job, right? Look, do you know why vice presidents never disagree with the president? It's not that they're sycophants. It's not that they're toadies. It's because what if someone is diseased enough to say, oh, president is favor of X, but the vice president is favor of Y. I'm in favor of Y. Now I'm going to take out the president. Right? I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, so that is why it's you might find it very rarely, but it's usually on a smaller item, a smaller issue, because you never want it to seem like you're trying to create governmental public policy space between yourself and the president, just so that some loon doesn't take the president out, so that, oh, well, now that you're in favor of it, therefore we'll change policy, right? So, and that's why, vice presidents are not supposed to be undermining the authority of the president. Go back to 1945. No, actually, this would have been 1944. Franklin Roosevelt is president. He's running for an unprecedented fourth term. Truman has just been nominated to be his running mate for the 1944 presidential election. The incumbent, Henry Wallace, got stopped by the conservatives in the Democratic Convention. There's a photograph, or some photographs. You want to look this up. I think it has to be August or maybe early September of 1944. There's a photograph of Franklin Roosevelt and he's not vice president, he's Senator Truman at the time. And who you don't see is Franklin Roosevelt's daughter. I think her name was Anna, was there. But that's not the shot. So Roosevelt's on the right. Truman, ironically enough, is more facing the camera. Truman, tan. You remember the phrase, tan, ready, and rested? He just looks at the top of the world. Roosevelt looks like a tired grandfather. And he's got a little bow tie. He's a little bit hunched over. Okay, what's Truman asked after the lunch? They actually had tuna on toast. I mean, the worst food you could find in the Capitol from 1933 to 1945 was at the White House. Mrs. Nesbitt was notoriously bad housekeeper. It was like the most common diner food you could possibly have. Okay, Mrs. Truman came in after the death of Roosevelt, took one look at Miss Nesbitt, and the food, she's like, "You're out of here," because it was just horrible. Anyway, sorry for the aside, but sorry, Miss Nesbitt, but you didn't know how to run a kitchen. So, so what does he say? Oh, well, the president ate more lunch than I did. He has a hearty appetite. Usually if you talk to older people, if they ate well, if a person ate well, oh, that means they're healthy. They had a good appetite, right? It's really funny, this old, okay. Well, but he talked to a friend afterwards and said, oh my God, his hand was shaking so much he could barely get the cream in his coffee. Now, is Truman a sack of trash because publicly he said, no, the president's fine? I mean, is it the place of the vice president to point out any physical frailties of the president? No, it's not. In fact, it's looks horrible. There's one question that a vice president should never ask about the president to the people who are close to the president. How's the president's health? Because you look like a ghoul. You look like you're waiting for the president to die, right?
I agree with you. It's not the role of the vice president to do that, but is it the role of the voter to notice and let that affect the decision making?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
of
right.
course,
And that's
of
all I'm
course.
saying. And
Yeah.
I'd say, I mean, I'm picking on Harris, but Vance, I mean, he's the worst about that.
Well, come on. If you look at, thank you for bringing that up, Carter.
Yeah.
If you look at Trump speaking at a late night talk show in the 1980s, just listen to him, okay? Now you take him to 2015, 2016, you can see that there's decline. Okay, from the mid 1980s to 2015, 2016, there's cognitive decline. It's obvious. He is, and what's worse is, there was a New York Times story in October of last year where the reporter was laying out all the behavioral characteristics of
signs,
Trump.
yeah.
Yes, of dementia. He was slurring his words. He was losing his train of thought. He was using very simple words. Sometimes he literally said things that weren't words. They were sounds, but they weren't really words. But that was buried on like page 16, 18 on the below the fold in the New York Times. No photograph. So, for all the coverage of Biden's frailties, which were and are real, Trump got a pass. Oh, well, Trump's being Trump. No, Trump is not being Trump. If you want to see Trump being Trump, go back to the 1980s interview at Late Night Talk Show. This is a man who is already suffering from dementia. The difference between Trump and Biden is Trump was loud and has 100% confidence. And so I want you to do this thought experiment, Carter. It's back in October. Let's say Biden didn't drop out. Biden hung in there, okay? And Biden is at a rally, and there's music playing. And he stops talking, closes his eyes, and kind of does what passes maybe for an old person's solo dance. Now, if Biden did that in October, people would come with a net and put him in a facility.
Yeah.
Trump does that in front of God and everybody. And what do people say?
It's celebrated. Don't forget, he did that town hall where he played opera music. He was there to do a speech. Played opera music, played Elvis, played YMCA. It went on for, I think, actually 40 minutes. No speaking. Play YMCA. He's telling the person controlling what to do. But yeah, to me, it's kind of been, I've joked, it's kind of a lesson in the different kinds of cognitive decline. Where Biden, I think the first and most jarring thing to happen was that his speech was affected. Whereas Trump, his concept of the world was affected. So he can have the confidence, and for a while he could explain things, and he could be funny, he could be charismatic while explaining these things. What he was explaining, it's like just the other day about tariffs, he was asked, President Trump, how do you feel about the stock market completely crashing? Americans are anxious about their finances, and he goes, it's a great thing, tariffs, we're seeing great results already. That was his response to that question. There's no other context.
Well, which means he didn't respond. He didn't acknowledge that the stock market, and remember, look, you have to be careful looking at the stock market values as an indication of the strength of the U.S. economy or any country's economy. At the same time, Trump himself would tout the stock market as an indication or a measure of, see how well I'm doing in the White House in his first term. Stock market was doing well. He said that meant he was doing well. Well, you can't have it both ways, Mr. President. You can't say, well, in the 2017, 2018, 2019, stock market was going gangbusters, therefore I'm doing a great job, and now completely ignoring. But see, that's another, it's not just a coping mechanism, Carter. That is something that people with dementia do. They don't engage with different parts of reality, and the reality they don't engage in will be different for every single dementia patient. And this is what's so scary to me, is the Republican Party, especially in Congress, has abdicated all responsibility. Look, the Department of Education was established by an act of Congress when James Earl Carter Jr. was president, late 1970s. Well, Trump's got a compliant Republican Congress. Abolish it. Now, since it was created in the late 1970s, obviously it's constitutional to abolish a government department, especially one that dates from the 1970s, not the 1780s. Okay?
Yeah.
So we've got that there. But he doesn't. No, he said, I'm doing a USAID, unconstitutional, illegal. The impounding of funds, they're calling it freezing. It's impounding. It's not letting it be spent. Do you know there's contractors who have already done work equal to $2 billion worth of work for the United States government who have not been paid, and so now they're suing in federal court? This is all illegal. This is all unconstitutional. And you have only a handful of Republican House members saying something, and they're being much more precise. They're saying, oh, gosh, golly gee, President Trump, could you please make sure that the spending for this one thing in my district is unfrozen? They're not saying across the board there's a problem with this, but they're district by district. Now, you have a handful of senators, Republican senators, Murkowski of Alaska, Collins of Maine, I don't know why McConnell. I mean, it does no good, and he knows it. From Kentucky, and then Rand Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, came out of nowhere, and also a senator from Kentucky. But by and large, the Republicans in Congress are abdicating their constitutional responsibilities, especially Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. There's only 3 offices mentioned in the executive branch. Excuse me, not executive branch, in the federal government. In the original Constitution, President, Vice President, Speaker of the House. There's not even the Chief Justice isn't mentioned in the Constitution. It just says there shall be a Supreme Court, that Congress shall establish a Supreme Court and other federal courts as from time to time it needs to. And so there's not even the Chief, and we think the Chief Justice, Chief Justice. No, that's not in the Constitution. And Speaker Johnson completely abdicating his responsibilities in the name of, you look any economist, the people who are defending Trump the most are either Republicans in the Congress or on Fox News or people actually in international relations, right, who said, oh, no, this is a reorientation, all this. But economists across the board saying, no, foreign countries don't pay. Foreign countries do not pay a tariff. It's the importer pays the tariff. And substantially, most of the time, the importer will pass on the increased price, right, because a tariff is a tax, to the consumer. And come on, very simple supply and demand curves, right? Price goes up, what happens to demand? Demand goes down. Most goods are price elastic, right? Oil is not price. Oil is price inelastic, meaning that if say there's a 20% increase in the price of bananas, there'll be roughly a 20% decline in demand for bananas. That's what makes it price elastic, and it doesn't make sense because especially when you look at Trump's reasoning for, well, why tariffs? Oh, there's fentanyl. Well, there's more fentanyl going from the United States into Canada than Canada to the United States. Okay.
I think, too, if the tariff is going to be used as this extreme kind of obscuring card trick, right? That can only work, I don't know, once through presidency and really work. And we saw it with Mexico, where he first employed them. They got 10,000 troops to the border and an agreement to have a firmer border policy. Cool. I guess that's a victory, right? Why use that on Mexico of all places? Why not China?
But we don't have a border with China. We don't have a land border.
You know what I
with
mean,
China.
though. Just if you're going to use the tariff as this crazy card trick to get whatever you want.
But see, remember, it's part of his earlier. Think about it in Trump world. Why go against Mexico about the tariffs? He brings up the border issue, immigrants, build the wall. His allegation that a disproportionate amount of people coming from south of the border into the United States were criminals of some kind. So that tariff on Mexico fits into a sad but consistent narrative that he's been talking about since 2015. It's the Canada, it's the European Union, right? That is just I mean, there's no connection to prior statements that Trump made. I mean, even if you disagree with Trump, you can say, well, he has been consistent about the border with Mexico. He said this in 2015, right? I mean, this has been, so this isn't a surprise at all. So even if one can disagree with him saying, hey, Mr. President, yeah, we get it. We understand your concern, but your solution isn't a solution. Okay, and could you still get the same consequence? Could you get the same results with a different policy that is less insulting to the people of Mexico? Right? No. So that is why, it's almost, well, see, but we've talked about, maybe not here, but I've talked about it outside. Maybe I mentioned today, I can't remember. We've been talking about a lot of things. Trump thinks that the increased tariff revenue coming into the federal government will help him get the revenue he needs for the federal government to rationalize making permanent the 2017 tax cuts to U.S. corporations and the very rich. This has everything to do with his deep desire, along with many Republicans, to make these tax cuts permanent, and without increasing massively the national debt. And it's simply impossible. Because remember, we talked about just a couple of minutes ago, if you raise the tariffs, you're ending up raising the prices on goods. And if you raise the prices on goods, you're going to be selling less. So even if partially that is offset by the increased price, by the increased tariff revenue, it's still going to lead to a decline in demand, which means after a while, guess what's going to happen to the imports? Certain imports, we're going to be importing less, right? Well, if you're importing less, I don't care if you have a 100% tariff. If you have less imports, you can't get tariff revenue from those imports. If you have 100 tons of product at a 10% tariff, and then you increase the tariff to 50%, well, you're not going to have 100 tons of that product be imported and exported into the United States. The United States is not going to import it. It's going to be a much decline. So you have to look at the 50% tariff, not on 100 tons of goods, but 50 tons of goods, or 40 tons of goods, or 30 tons of goods. See what I mean? That's why the numbers aren't going to add up. It's as if someone has said to him massively incorrectly, boss, look at how much we import of this product. But this is the tariff we have on it. 2.5%, whatever it is, 5%, it depends on the product. But, okay, now we're going to do 50% or 67%. They seem to think they're still going to get the same amount of goods coming into the country at the 67% or 50% tariff. That's simply not true. People aren't going to buy it. If that price goes up by any way close to the amount of the tariff amount. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How do you think other countries are going to respond?
Oh, they already have.
Right.
The European Union has been studying this for quite some time. And so, and Canada too, you're going to see tariffs on Kentucky bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, could be Texas cotton. They're going to target red state products disproportionately. Okay? And because I think what their reasoning is, President Trump is doing this because he thinks he has the support of the American people. Mr. Trump is going to totally ignore what the people of California, Washington State, Oregon, Hawaii, Illinois, New York, New England, Maryland, right? Because they're Democratic states, he will literally ignore them. It doesn't matter to him what is happening in traditional Democratic states. It doesn't matter. So I think what they're thinking is, fine, make the hurt disproportionate on the so-called red states. And if you have a major decline in areas that have routinely supported President Trump, the High Plains, Texas, most of the South, then that's going to turn into people screaming who voted for him not only in 2024 but 2020, maybe even 2016, saying, you're killing me. Mm-hmm. So they're going to do that. Also, you have to remember, Canada already is a member of the European Free Trade area. Now, there's not a lot of countries in that. Used to be a lot more until the explosion of EU countries, right? But Norway is a member. I think Switzerland is a member. There's a handful. Well, what if Canada actually says to Europe, EU, we want to be part of the EU? Now think of how great that would be for both of them. Okay, all of a sudden you have a very large market for Canadian products in the EU, right? Because you're talking about countries from Spain, Portugal, all the way over to what? Finland and the Baltic. You have just a very large market, right? But why is it so great for Europe? Canada has natural gas and oil, massive reduction of dependency on Russian energy goods. It really is great. And Canada has much less of a worry of any kind of invasion from Russia, right? And remember, Canada is a member state of NATO, as is most of the European countries who are also EU member states. There's very few EU members who are not NATO members. Austria is one of them. So this could be, and also, this is another thing. What President Trump did not realize, it appears, or any of his advisors, because all they said is, yes, sir, instead of saying, boss, the stopping and the starting. I'm going to put tariffs 30 days from now. Negotiate. Okay, I'm postponing it by 30 days. Negotiate. Oh, I'm postponing it by another 30 days. Okay, great. If you're Canada and Mexico, those are great. Okay, those extensions, those delays. But guess what that has done? That has given the Canadian-Mexican government now, January 20th, begging your pardon, January 20th to say what, April 2nd? Think how many days that is. If I'm Mexico and I'm Canada, I'm spending every single day talking to Europeans, the European Union. I'm talking to Japan. If I'm Mexico, I'm talking to Mercosur, the South American free trade bloc of Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Brazil has a very large economy. My memory is Brazil's economy is larger than Italy's. Okay, so it's real. Brazil is slightly larger than the 48 states of the United States, the lower 48, so to speak. You're giving them a chance to look for alternative suppliers, alternative demanders. I know that's not a word, but alternative consumer markets, right? Alternative markets for your goods. And because you can't, if you threaten to say, I am going to do something in 30 days, you've just given people 30 days to either stockpile, right? Let's import as much of this stuff as humanly possible, because we're told, right? Think about it. It doesn't matter if I'm the United States or Bulgaria. If I'm Bulgaria and you're Romania, and we have a really strong trade partnership, and I say, I'm going to impose 50% tariffs on you, what will the Romanian government do? In the short run, it can say, we're going to buy as much stuff that we normally buy from Bulgaria, and we're going to triple, quadruple our orders, right? Second thing we're doing is we're giving those 30 days so we can look at the other parts of Europe. Does Serbia or does Slovenia or Austria or Italy, whatever, Ukraine, whatever, who else produces this good? You give them time for them to search for options, alternatives. And that's why this stopping and starting was the worst of all possible worlds. He finally did say, not kidding, April 2nd, Independence Day, no, Liberation Day. It wasn't. All he did was to create the conditions for increased anger and increased disappointment and increased sadness of many different countries towards the United States government. But it also gave them opportunities, more time to look at alternatives, options for their economies. And trust me, they've taken advantage of it. They have used that time very profitably. And you're going to also, especially with Canada, we're in Texas, right? So we don't think of Canada. We need to. Tell me what are the top 3 tourist attractions by number of people visiting them in Texas?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, you can think of one.
Well, the Alamo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alamo's number 1. The Riverwalk is number 2. And the San Marcos outlet malls are 3.
Wow. Huh.
Okay? Now, do you know that there's Canadians who on their own are saying, we're not going to visit Texas because of how, now again, this isn't, and remember, I mean, Trump's not from Texas, New York City, now he's Florida, right? Okay. But we didn't notice it because we're not in Canada. But Governor Abbott made a point of being more Catholic than the Pope and giving a speech and saying 100% behind President Trump with all those mean, nasty Canadians. I mean, obviously he didn't say it that way, but he was basically saying, yes, Canadian government has been unfair. Okay, so trust me, there are already people who used to come to Texas who are now saying no. There are Canadians who will not be going to Florida, okay, that they're going to reroute their travel, their vacation. So Canadians have some money. If you have a Canadian that's going to be in the United States, in Texas for 2 months, you know they're not worried about food coupons at the grocery store. They've got some money. They're going to spend some money. They're not spending it. There was a man who had in Maine, okay, Maine, was showing on the news. It was a stack. It had to be, what is it, 2, 3, like over 3 inches thick of reservations from Canadians at his, I don't know if it was a B&B, whatever, but it was a resort thing. And it was like a fourth was U.S. He lost 3/4 of the Canadian customers. Wow. Because of it. He said, if this continues, I will go out of business. So we don't even think of crossing the border, but there's going to be businesses in Maine, in Vermont, in New York State, maybe even New Hampshire, that are going to go under. And so you're going to be seeing a inflationary recession nationwide, but you're going to be seeing different kinds of recessions because of, frankly, what would I call it? The hospitality industry. Oh, one other thing. I apologize. If you want to say something, I've been talking too long.
Okay, any Canadians out there, this is a safe space for you. Come on the show. We're right outside of Austin, Texas. Drew Barrymore, she's Canadian. I think she's Canadian. Jerry Seinfeld.
Michael Myers is Canadian. Ryan Gosling. All you ladies out there who think he's a heartthrob, Ryan Gosling is Canadian. I think he's from BC, British Columbia. Who's the other one? He's Deadpool.
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds is a Canadian.
These are all nice people.
Well, I've heard some things about Ryan Reynolds. So I don't know if Ryan is that. Ryan Gosling seems to be a nice person, but I'm not so sure about,
He's good in La La Land.
Yeah, but, and there's a lot of nice Canadians who you've never met, who aren't Hollywood stars.
And Canadians, just knock on the door, give us a little, and come on the show, because I'm sure you guys are great. It was great talking to you, speaking of.
Oh.
I think that's about all the time we got for
today.
Okay.
Sounds good.
This was a blast, as always. We'll be seeing you again. Well, let's tell the folks at home a little bit about the podcast we have planned. So I love talking to Ed on here, but I thought he has so much to say about news, and there's so much to unpack about news and current events as they're occurring. So we thought about starting our own podcast. Ed, tell us the name and kind of where you came up with the name.
The name for one of the podcasts would be Slouching Towards Armageddon. Mm-hmm. And that is an adaptation of a classic title of a poem by William Butler Yeats titled Slouching Towards Bethlehem, which he wrote in 1916 about the Second Coming. And Joan Didion popularized it because she had a book of essays that was published, was it 1970s, I think, called Slouching Towards Bethlehem. And that's where a lot of people heard it more than Yeats's poem. And so since we have nuclear weapons, since climate change, I was just thinking Slouching Towards Armageddon might be closer to the bone for a title.
I think that's great too, just beyond the reference, because I think it is. I don't think it's it's not like a cat pouncing. It is very much a slouch.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, and I'll be seeing you around. We'll be filming our first episode of that on Thursday, and should be out Wednesday. It should be out that same day to the folks at home. Everyone listening, have a great rest of your day. Whether you're listening the day this was recorded or many years from now, in which case, drop a comment. What is happening in the world today? So people can talk about that.
And please give us feedback.
Please give us feedback. Were we accurate?
And what you'd like us to talk about?
Yes. electriccircuspod@gmail.com. That's a electriccircuspod@gmail.com. There you go. All right. Bye-bye now.